Good evening and welcome to Overtime here on WOTM. I'm Gerhard MATHANGANI, joined by our expert historian / researcher, Mark Everett Kelly. He's got some good stuff and good numbers about the Atlanta Braves as they close in on their regular season, getting ready for a run in the playoffs. We'll also talk a little NFL. We'll set the table for Week 5 in high school football. But first, Mark, let's start in college football. It's a really interesting week this week. We'll see a little bit more in conference games. So that got you and me talking about some of the things that we've seen in the SEC so far. We obviously haven't had a whole lot of in-conference matchups to break down. We'll have a few more coming up this week. But take the top two teams out. Alabama and Georgia. Those are the two teams I think everybody kind of knew going into the season will be two of the top teams playing for the championship. So far, there have been some impressive teams outside of those. Who has impressed you so far?
Most people would probably say Texas A&M would be up there because of their defense. Their defense has been outstanding. Now, granted, when they played Colorado's not the most explosive offense. But when they played New Mexico had passed for 381 yards against New Mexico State. They held New Mexico to 33 yards passing. They're holding opponents to 47% passing in a time, 77 yards per game, in a time when passing has been dominating college football. So I think that alone has been pretty impressive. Can Texas A&M do that against teams from the SEC? They'll get a pretty good test. I don't know about passing the ball, but the Arkansas team that has played so far has been just as impressive offensively. They've been dominant running the ball. They absolutely destroyed Texas on a line of scrimmage. They've been doing that to all their opponents. They're playing very physical, and Texas A&M's defense plays very physical. I don't like Texas A&M on offense because the quarterback got hurt, and they're probably not going to score 34 points a game like they did last game against good defenses in the SEC. But their defense can change a lot of games. I don't know if it's good enough to beat Alabama or if it's good enough to consistently stop a team like Ole Miss or even Mississippi State if they're really going on all cylinders. But we'll see what exactly this Texas A&M defense is about when they play Arkansas on Saturday, a game I am really looking forward to. The SEC West has really surprised not only Arkansas, but I think Auburn has really shown themselves well. Look, going into the Penn State, I want to say Death Valley, but Happy Valley, and playing that well in a whiteout when, I mean, they were ready for that game, Penn State. That was special to them. They've taken a lot of abuse, and rightly so, for some of the things that had happened there. So that was a moment that they viewed as their own Penn State, and if they didn't win that game, that would have been really disappointing. But I think Auburn showed a lot of heart. I think Bo Nix, who historically has played really poorly on the road, starting to show that maybe he's over that a little bit. And I think that if Auburn can get that kind of play from Nix and run the ball like they did and like they have been, I love what Digby brings to their team. I think he's a dynamic runner. I think he's a physical runner. And I think he's going to do very well in SEC play as well. And a couple of things happened to them while they lost that game against Penn State. They easily could have won that game. So that would have been big for them one way. I think it was just as big for Penn State the other way for them being able to compete in the Big Ten. But as far as the SEC, Auburn can be just as successful in league play as an Arkansas or as an LSU. It all depends on which way, how the ball bounces in some of those games, because there's very little separating some of those teams.
There's 7 teams in the top 25 out of the SEC. 5 are out of the SEC West. You mentioned the fact that Auburn's played really well. Texas A&M's kind of essentially played to par. Let's take a look at the teams out of the SEC that are in the top 25. Another team that really has everybody kind of, I think, they going from unranked to number 13, I think Ole Miss has probably done the most for their overall resume so far. You have to play an SEC game as of now. You've seen the overall records and their SEC records. I really like what Ole Miss has done. And one of the things that you pointed out was this is the first time since about this time last year where we had this many teams in the top 16.
Yeah, I think Ole Miss, coming into the season, a lot of people were expecting Ole Miss to be one of the better teams in the SEC. And offensively especially, that they can just explode offensively. All you needed to watch was that Alabama game last year to see the weapons they have. But they really haven't lost, outside of Elijah Moore, they really haven't lost too many weapons. Matt Corral has been just as good this year as he expected him to be. 9 touchdowns, no interceptions, completing just under 70% of his passes. They'll get tougher competition as the season goes on. Everybody's got to play the same teams in the SEC West, with the exception of the 2 games that they play against the East, which could make a difference overall. But I think against each other, they're going to either knock each other out or somebody's going to gang up on them.
Exactly. We'll still have a lot to learn over the coming up next few weeks. Meanwhile, we have a lot of in-conference matchups coming up this weekend. On Saturday, a lot of these games will be in our Pick'em segment a little bit later on in our program. So not necessarily a Pick'em, but if you only had to pick one game, which is the most interesting for you this week?
Well, I think Florida, how they play against Tennessee, that has letdown written all over it. They've really showed me something against Alabama. But again, we talked about this before off camera. A senior-laden team that's taken advantage of the transfer rules and the fact that you were able to get that 5th year coming off of COVID.
Exactly. I'm really looking forward to that LSU-Mississippi State game. I think Coach Orgeron's bunch, they'll have a lot of things to prove going to Starkville. I think it's going to be a really interesting matchup. Once again, we'll have a lot of these games in our Pick'em segment coming up a little bit later in our program. We do want to remind you that we have some great high school football coming your way over the next couple of days. Coming up tomorrow, it is the AHSAA WOTM Game of the Week. The Oxford Yellow Jackets traveling over to Etowah County. They'll face the Gadsden City Titans. Kickoff is set for 7 o'clock right here on WOTM, as well as My 68. And then on Friday, the Friday Night Rivals Game of the Week. You can catch this on My 68. 7 o'clock, it is one of the best games in the state, if not the best game in the state of Alabama. 2 teams that could very well be playing deep into the playoffs, if not for the state championship. This is a number 2 versus number 3 in the state in Class 5A. Central Clay County, number 3, traveling to Pleasant Grove, number 2. That game will air Friday night on the Friday Night Rivals Game of the Week. You can catch that on My 68, and then the replay Saturday morning, 9 a.m., right here on WOTM. That is the re-air on Saturday morning to wet your whistle before the college football slate. So some great high school football games coming your way over the course of the next couple of days here on WOTM, as well as My 68. Coming up next here on our program, we'll talk a little bit more college football, but first we'll dive into the Atlanta Braves, who are on a very nice streak as they make a run to the playoffs. That's coming up next.